Let me talk to somebody today who's standing in the ashes of what used to be. You've been through some things, life didn't go as planned. Maybe you made some choices you regret. Maybe some things were done to you that derailed your journey. And now somewhere along the way, you started to believe the lie that it's too late to dream again, too late to get back up, too late to make a change, too late to find healing, too late to be used by God. But I came here to tell you something straight from heaven's heart. It's never too late to start again. I don't care how far you've fallen, how long you've been stuck, or how many years have been wasted. When God steps into your situation, He brings resurrection power with Him. He doesn't just patch things up, He makes all things new. Some of y'all are living like your expiration date already passed, but God's not finished writing your story. The chapter you're in right now is not the last one. You're not too broken, not too behind, not too old, not too far gone. Too far gone. And if you've still got breath in your body, then heaven still has a purpose for your life. So don't you tune out now. Don't let shame, fear, or discouragement keep you from hearing this word. Because what you're about to hear could be the turning point in your life. Not next year, not next month, but right now. God is calling you to rise again, to believe again, to start again. And this time you won't be doing it alone, you see. One of the greatest lies the enemy wants you to believe is that your past disqualifies you from your future. He wants you to carry shame like it's your identity. He wants you to wake up every day rehearsing the mistakes, the mess-ups, the missed opportunities, as if that's all you'll ever be. But let me remind you of something. The grace of God isn't fragile. It's not intimidated by your failures. In fact, it was designed to meet you right there. In the middle of the rubble, in the dirt, in the place where your strength gave out and your hope gave in. God never asked you to come to Him fixed. He never demanded perfection before offering redemption. What He wants is surrender. He wants a surrender. Because it's in surrender that grace flows. And when grace flows, dead things start coming back to life. That means it doesn't matter how long it's been. It doesn't matter how deep the damage goes. The God we serve is a God of new beginnings. His mercies, the word says, are new every single morning. That means every time the sun rises, heaven is announcing another chance. You didn't miss it. You didn't mess it up so bad that God tore up the blueprint. He still has a plan, and His plan still includes you. Now I know there are some people sitting under the weight of guilt thinking, yeah, but you don't know what I did. You don't know how many times I failed. You don't know how far I fell. And you're right. I may not, but God does, and He still wants you. He still chose you. He still calls you by name, even when everyone else labeled you by your failure, because God doesn't consult your past to determine your purpose. His grace isn't based on your record. It's based on His goodness. You've got to stop rehearsing what went wrong and start remembering who your God is. He's the one who met Moses in the wilderness after 40 years of silence. He's the one who raised up David after adultery, and murder. He's the one who restored Peter after denial. He's the one who met Paul on a dusty road while he was on his way to persecute believers. If grace had an expiration date, none of them would have made it. But grace doesn't expire. It empowers. It doesn't excuse sin, but it overcomes it with forgiveness, with power, with a fresh start. Sometimes the reason we don't believe it's possible to start again is because we've been trying to do it in our own strength. We've been measuring our ability to restart based on our energy, our willpower, or our resources. But this kind of restart isn't about your strength. It's about His sufficiency. When grace gets involved, your weakness becomes the very platform for God's power to be revealed. Your scars become testimonies. Your brokenness becomes the birthplace of ministry. Your failure becomes the setup for favor. That's how God works. So if you're still breathing, then there's still grace available. You're not beyond reach. You're not too late. You're not too broken. What God is looking for is not the person who has it all together, but the one who will come to Him with open hands and say, Lord, I'm ready. I don't have all the answers. I've got wounds, I've got baggage, I've got regrets, but I'm ready to trust you. Because when you bring God your emptiness, He fills it. When you bring Him your confusion, He speaks clarity. When you bring Him your weakness, He gives strength. And when you bring Him your past, He writes a new future. That's the power of grace. It wipes the slate clean and hands you a pen soaked in redemption to start writing the next chapter. But you've got to believe it. not just in your head, but down in your spirit. You've got to let that truth confront the lie you've been carrying, that it's too late, that you've gone too far. The devil is a liar. As long as God is still on the throne, and he is, it's never too late to start again. Let me tell you something that might shake up how you've been seeing your life. Just because it didn't happen when you thought it should, or how you thought it would, doesn't mean God said no. Delay is not denial. A detour is not a dead end. What looks like a pause to you may be divine preparation. What feels like silence may actually be strategy. God is never in a hurry, but he's always on time. And while you're worrying that it's too late, God is working behind the scenes, getting everything aligned, because when he moves in fullness. Some of you have been asking, God, where are you? Because it feels like you've been in the waiting room of life forever. You've been stuck in between what used to be and what you hope will be. Maybe doors closed. Maybe relationships ended. Maybe the dream got delayed. And now you're wondering if the delay means God changed his mind. But let me encourage you. God didn't change his mind. He's just taking the long route so he can build the foundation deep. He's more interested in developing your character than rushing your comfort. Because what God is building in you requires stability, maturity, and faith that's been tested. If you look through scripture, you'll see a pattern. God always works through detours. Joseph had a dream as a teenager, but he didn't step into that dream until years later, after betrayal, slavery, and prison. David was anointed king, but then spent years running from Saul before he ever wore a crown. Even Jesus didn't begin his public ministry until he was 30. And before he ever worked a miracle, he went through the wilderness. Why? Because divine delay is a part of divine design. Sometimes God allows you to be hidden before he elevates you. He lets you sit in the dark before he brings you into the spotlight. Because he knows if he promotes you too soon, you'll crumble under the weight of what you're not ready to carry. So he lets you be refined in obscurity, shaped in silence, molded in the shadows, so that when the time comes, you're not just gifted, you're grounded. And I know that waiting can be painful. The space between the promise and the fulfillment can feel like a wilderness. But in the wilderness is where God does some of his best work. That's where he strips away distractions. That's where he teaches you to depend on him. That's where he breaks pride and births purpose. If you try to rush out of it, you might miss the very thing that's preparing you for what's next. The delay isn't punishment. It's preparation. Don't measure the pace of your life against someone else's progress. Just because they look like they're moving faster doesn't mean they're going further. God doesn't work according to your neighbor's timeline. He's tailoring your journey uniquely for you. Your story isn't supposed to match anyone else's because your calling isn't like anyone else's. Trust his process, even if it's slow, even if it's quiet, even if it feels like nothing's happening. God is never wasting time. He's just working in ways you don't yet see. That closed door might have been protection. That delay might have been mercy. That disappointment might have been redirection. God's detours are always tied to destiny. You think you're wandering, but he's leading. You think you're stuck, but he's staging. You think it's over, but he's only just beginning. And here's the beautiful thing. When God finally says it's time, what he's prepared will not only meet you where you are, it will exceed what you thought you lost. He's the kind of God who restores the years, not just the moment, not just the day, but the years. Everything the locusts have eaten, everything time has taken, everything sin has broken. He redeems it all. So if it feels like you're on a detour, don't give up. Don't assume you missed it. Don't settle in discouragement. Just because you're delayed doesn't mean you've been denied. Heaven's clock is still ticking and your story is still unfolding. God knows exactly where you are and exactly how to get you where you're going. You just keep walking, keep believing, keep trusting because it's never too late to start again. There comes a moment when you have to make a decision, not based on how you feel, not based on what you've lost, not based on how long it's been, but based on who God is. At some point, you've got to take a step of faith, a step that says, I may not know how it's going to turn out, but I trust the one who does. Because if you're going to start again, you're going to have to move, even when you don't have all the pieces in place. Faith doesn't wait for perfect conditions. It moves in obedience and lets God handle the outcome. The problem for many of us is that we want to feel ready before we act. We want to have certainty before we walk. But faith is the opposite. Faith is trusting God enough to walk on water when logic says you'll sink. It's stepping out of the boat when everything in you says to stay where it's safe. It's moving forward even when fear is whispering in your ear that you'll fail again. But you have to understand something. Faith isn't about ignoring fear. It's about obeying God in spite of it. Some of us are stuck because we're waiting to feel something before we do something. But feelings don't activate your future. Faith does. You don't wait until all the lights turn green before you pull out of the driveway. No, you move with what you have, and God provides the rest along the way. That first step might feel shaky. You might feel unqualified, unsure, and unsteady. But if God said it's time to start again, then you've got to believe that His power is walking with you. You see, faith isn't just believing that God exists. It's trusting Him enough to follow Him where He leads, even when the path is unfamiliar. It's looking at your past and saying, yes, that happened, but my God is greater. It's refusing to let the fear of failing again keep you from building again. It's knowing that if God brought you to it, He's more than able to bring you through it. There's something powerful that happens when you start walking by faith. Heaven starts moving with you. Doors begin to open that you didn't even knock on. Opportunities begin to rise that you never expected. Strength begins to show up that you didn't know you had. Because when you move in faith, you are not walking alone. God is walking beside you, clearing the way, making rivers in the desert and paths in the wilderness. Don't let fear rob you of what God wants to do next. Don't let past failure speak louder than future possibility. Fear will always remind you of what went wrong, but faith will point you to what God can make right. The enemy will try to use every past mistake as evidence against your ability to begin again, but God's grace already overruled that case. It's time to stop sitting in spiritual paralysis and start moving in divine purpose. Starting again doesn't mean starting from scratch. It means starting from experience, starting with lessons, starting with deeper trust. You're not where you were before. You've grown, you've endured, you've survived. That alone is proof that there's more ahead. You may feel like you're starting from the bottom, but you're starting with God, and that's a foundation that cannot be shaken. Sometimes God waits for you to move before He reveals the next step. He won't always show you the full picture, but He'll give you enough to take the first step. And as you move, the next step becomes clear. This walk is not about certainty, it's about commitment. You've got to commit to the process, even when the outcome isn't obvious. That's what faith does. It trusts God with the unknown, and it moves anyway. Don't let doubt keep you in a place God already told you to leave. Don't let shame convince you to stay in what He's already forgiven. Don't let the fear of what if fuck you out of the promise of what will be. God doesn't call the fearless. He calls the faithful. And if you'll take that step today, if you'll trust Him even a little, He'll meet you in that movement. Because His power shows up where faith steps out. So even if it's quiet, even if it feels uncertain, take the step. Walk toward your new beginning. Because no matter how long it's been or how far you've fallen, it's never too late to start again. There's something you need to hear deep down in your soul today. Your failure is not final. Your future is not canceled because of a broken chapter. What happened in your past might have shaped you, but it does not get to define you. God gets the final word, and He's not done writing your story. You may have messed up, you may have walked away, you may have fallen hard, but hear me, that does not disqualify you from the purpose God still has for your life. One of the greatest tricks of the enemy is convincing people that what they've done has destroyed what God planned. But the enemy doesn't hold the pen. He doesn't have authorship over your life. He only has whispers, and too many people have mistaken his lies for God's truth. The enemy says you've gone too far. God says, come home. The enemy says you're broken beyond repair. God says, I make all things new. The enemy says it's over, but God says, I'm just getting started. You see, God isn't interested in perfect resumes. He's interested in surrendered hearts. He's not looking for people who've never failed. He's looking for people who failed and still dare to believe, still dare to get up, still dare to get up, still dare to hope again, because that's where real faith lives, in the tension between failure and the fight to keep going. That's where God shows off His glory, not in your perfection, but in your persistence to trust Him despite it all. Some of the most powerful people in the Bible had painful pasts. And yet God used them mightily. That's not a coincidence. That's a pattern. He doesn't avoid broken vessels, he chooses them. Because when God takes what's been shattered and puts it back together, the cracks become windows for his light to shine through. That's why your greatest ministry might come from your greatest mistake. That's why your most powerful testimony might rise from your most painful failure. God doesn't waste anything, not even your worst day. He takes the very things the enemy meant for evil and he repurposes them for good. The tears you cried in the dark, he saw them. The moments you were ashamed to even pray, he heard them. And he didn't walk away. He stayed, he waited. And he's still here now, reminding you that there is more ahead. There's still purpose in your bones, still breath in your lungs, still destiny in your DNA. You don't have to live your life chained to a chapter God already turned the page on. The past is real, but it's not the ruler. You may carry the memory, but you don't have to carry the guilt. Grace has already gone to work on your behalf. You've been forgiven, you've been redeemed. And now you've been called to walk forward, not with your head down, but with your head lifted, knowing the God who began a good work in you is faithful to complete it. Don't let people's opinion of who you were talk you out of becoming who God says you are. People remember the failure, but God remembers the promise. People replay the past, but God declares the future. And if he still believes in you, why shouldn't you? If he says there's more, why settle for less? If he's offering you a fresh start, why stay in yesterday? There's more ahead of you than behind you. The best version of your life doesn't have to be a memory. It can be your reality if you'll believe, if you'll trust, if you'll surrender. But you've got to stop letting failure narrate your future. Failure may have happened, but it doesn't have to have the mic anymore. Give that microphone back to the Holy Spirit and let him speak life into the places you thought were dead. Yes, you've been hurt. Yes, you've been disappointed. Yes, you've even made some decisions that brought you pain. But none of that is greater than the God who calls you forward. He restores what was lost. He redeems what was broken. He resurrects what seemed dead. And when he does it, it doesn't just bring you back to where you were. It launches you into something better than you imagined. So don't look back with regret. Look forward with hope. Let your faith rise. Let your heart open. Let your spirit believe again. Because no matter what has happened before, no matter how deep the failure or how long it's been, it's never too late to start again.